In the damp gloom of the old San Bartolomeo Hospital, where the stench of ether blends with the mold peeling from the walls, every sound seems louder than it should be. The squeaky wheels of gurneys echo like metallic shrieks. The fluorescent lights flicker in sequence, creating a disturbing strobe effect, as if the corridors themselves were breathing or waiting. It was the beginning of another long night shift, and with it, the new nursing technician, Jonas, was starting his first overnight duty. Coming from a more modern hospital, he immediately noticed the outdated structure, the analog equipment, and the permanently tired eyes of the staff. The place seemed forgotten by time, functioning not by protocol, but by sheer insistence. During the handoff, amidst reports of high fevers, catheter changes, and antibiotic schedules, a silent warning was whispered with the same casual tone used to point out where the defibrillators were. The night supervisor, a firm-voiced woman named Halilietiat Orifestaus, spoke without meeting his gaze. "Jonas, if you need anything, don't go into 5B. It's closed." He chuckled, thinking it was some inside joke among the staff, but no one laughed with him. A heavy silence fell. Iliot then added, staring straight at him, "If you hear something in there, pretend you didn't." Ward 5B was an isolated hallway at the far end of the third floor. According to whispers, it had been shut down after a fire broke out in the pediatric psychiatry unit. Officially, the fire started from a short circuit in an old defibrillator. But those who worked that night swear the flames appeared from nowhere, the extinguishers failed, and, as if time had stopped, no one could reach the stairs. 3 children died, and since that night, no one has entered that hallway again, or at least no one came back to tell. On his first night, Jonas tried to remain logical. He dismissed the warning as classic hospital folklore. It was common in old buildings for legends to circulate to scare the new guys. But at 2:17 a.m., during his rounds, the motion sensor for corridor 5B triggered by itself. The monitoring panel flashed red. A silhouette was detected for 3 seconds, then nothing. No person, no sign of life. Defying orders driven by a childish urge to prove it was all superstition, Jonas took the keys and walked to the end of the third floor. The hallway to 5B was dark. The emergency light blinked in red tones, casting moving shadows along the walls as if they danced. The doorknob was cold and damp, as if someone had just let go of it. He hesitated. Then he heard it, a high-pitched, repetitive noise, like metal, scraping against the floor. Then, muffled children's laughter. There was no one else on that floor. With shallow breath and trembling fingers, he inserted the key and turned it. The door didn't open, but the noise stopped instantly, the exact second the lock clicked. Jonas pressed his ear against the worn wood. Nothing. Complete silence. He turned to leave, and the door unlocked by itself behind him. It opened with a long, groaning creak that felt like it lasted minutes. A pitch-dark hallway was revealed, lit only by a row of flickering ceiling lights. On the floor, small wheelchair tire tracks led to the end of the corridor, where one door stood open. Inside, something shimmered. Jonas stepped inside. The air turned ice cold. His breath turned to mist. The scent of something burned was subtle but unmistakable. 2 more steps. Then, voices, faint like murmurs behind a wall. One stood out above the rest, calling to him, "Mister, can you see me? Can you help me get out?" He stepped back, but when he looked behind him, the door he entered through was no longer there. The hallway had changed. It was now completely different, longer, darker, older, as if he was no longer inside the hospital, but walking through a memory lost in time. The walls bore the imprint of burned hands, and above him, the lights flickered one by one until each bulb exploded. Footsteps echoed behind him, rushing closer. As he turned to run, something grabbed his ankle. He fell, rolled across the floor, and for a brief second, saw the face of a burned little girl smiling at him. She whispered, "Thank you for remembering." He woke up in the infirmary bed, drenched in sweat, screaming, clutching something in his hand. A melted child's ID badge. The name on it, Livia, Ward 5B. But Ward 5B, according to the hospital's technical director, never existed. There are no records, no blueprints, no system entry under that designation, and Nurse Elliott had been on leave for months due to a psychotic episode, but the badge remains with Jonas. And every night at 2:17 a.m., the motion sensor at the end of the hallway activates again, and the door opens. It was around 3 in the morning when emergency tech Rodrigo, exhausted after transferring a critical patient from the ICU to the surgical ward, received an unusual call. They needed an extra stretcher in the imaging department. Nothing strange, except for the fact that all spare stretchers were stored in the hospital's basement, a space rarely accessed, used only to store old equipment, outdated files, and broken furniture. Santa Madalena Hospital, founded in the 1960s, had a subterranean structure that resembled more a wartime bunker than part of a healthcare facility. There were narrow hallways, cracked walls, and a constant dampness that fogged up the flickering fluorescent lights. Access was either by a freight elevator or a poorly lit concrete stairwell. Rodrigo chose the stairs. He didn't trust that elevator, and honestly, he hoped the physical exertion would shake off the drowsiness. Each step creaked under his feet, and it felt like he was descending deeper than the hospital should even allow. When he reached the basement, the air was different. Colder, thicker, heavier. The corridor was empty, except for piles of boxes stacked against the walls and a single flickering bulb dangling from an exposed wire. He turned on his flashlight and moved forward, passing rooms labeled with faded tags, Radiology 1987, morgue records, burnt equipment. Everything looked like part of a wing forgotten by time. When he reached the door to the stretcher room, he noticed it was ajar. He pushed it gently. The hinges groaned loudly, as if no one had moved them in years. Inside, 5 dusty stretchers stood side by side. He chose the one that looked most intact, but as he began pulling it toward the door, he heard a low, nearly imperceptible sound. A voice, a child's. Mr. Rodrigo froze. He thought it might have been a stray thought, or maybe a radio playing somewhere in the hospital. But the voice came again. "Mister, I'm lost." He looked back. Nothing, just darkness. He aimed the flashlight into the corners of the room. Empty. He crouched to look under the stretchers. Nothing. The door was ajar, and the hallway outside now looked even darker than before. That's when the voice came again, closer now. "Mister, help me." Panic started to simmer beneath his skin. Rodrigo shoved the stretcher forward, trying to leave as quickly as possible. But as he crossed the doorway, he felt something small dart behind his legs, like a child. The air turned icy. The flashlight flickered. When he turned, at the end of the hallway stood the silhouette of a little girl. She was barefoot, wearing a child-sized hospital gown, and her hair clung to her face as if wet. She had no eyes, only empty black sockets. "Have you seen my mom?" asked the voice, even though her mouth never moved. Rodrigo ran. He sprinted up the stairs, skipping steps, panting, feeling as if something was pulling him back with every stride. When he finally reached the ground floor, he locked the door to the basement access and never went down there again. In the following days, he tried to brush it off, blamed it on fatigue, on too many shifts. Until one silent night, while having coffee in the break room, he saw the girl's image reflected in the microwave door. She was standing behind him. When he turned around, nothing. He reported the incident to his supervisor. They said it was more common than one might think. "Others have heard the same voice," confessed an older nurse. According to her, a pediatric patient had disappeared in the 1990s after fleeing her room and entering the freight elevator heading to the basement. She was never found. The official report claimed the girl left the hospital, but the security guard on duty swore that not a single exit door had opened that night. In the hospital's internal system, there's still an active missing alert for a patient named Camilla M., 7 years old, pediatric bed 209. And on certain nights, always Mondays during the waning moon, the basement intercom system emits a random noise picked up by maintenance sensors. A child's voice calling for help. "Mister, I'm lost." And the worst part? The maintenance tech sent to investigate the sound wiring never came back. The second floor of São Sebastião Hospital was one of the oldest parts of the building. Within it sat the infamous Room 223. Once used as a resuscitation room years ago, it was a small space, its greenish walls now crumbling with a constant scent of expired IV fluids, even though it had been officially closed for over a decade. No one used it, or at least no one was supposed to. But what truly unsettled the staff was the fact that from time to time the door appeared slightly ajar, and inside, all the clocks stopped. The rumors grew after Dr. Felipe, an ICU resident, was summoned to respond to a patient in cardiac arrest. The emergency had been triggered by mistake. There was no occupied bed in the system with that number. Following the irregular beeping of the hospital intercom, Felipe arrived at the second floor and found the door to room 223 partially open. The light inside was on. He hesitated, but assuming it was a system error or a misassigned bed, he stepped inside. His wristwatch stopped. His pager went silent. His phone, which had 78% battery, shut off instantly as he crossed the threshold. The first thing he saw was a hospital bed in the center of the room, covered with crisp white sheets. Too clean. There was no smell of mold, no dust. It all looked freshly washed. Yet the silence was complete. No hallway noise, no ECG beeps, not even the hum of the lights. As if sound itself had been drained from the air. He took 2 more steps. That's when he felt it. The air had grown thick, heavy, like the very atmosphere was pressing against him. A chill ran down his spine. At the far end of the room stood a man in a white coat, facing away, motionless beside the bed. He was as still as a statue. The lab coat was soaked in blood. Felipe tried to speak, but no sound came out. He inched forward, trying to determine whether this was a colleague, a patient, or some kind of sick prank. But the closer he got, the more he realized the man wasn't breathing. His body was completely motionless, almost mummified. When Felipe reached out to touch him, the figure suddenly turned around. His face was horribly deformed, with no distinct features, done like a melting slab of flesh. Then it spoke, in a voice that wasn't human. "Do you want to fade too?" Felipe stumbled back and fell. As he hit the floor, the lights died. When his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he realized he was no longer in the same room. The walls were now lined with broken mirrors, and in their distorted reflections, he saw himself aging by the second. He tried to scream. Nothing. Tried to run. The floor stretched endlessly beneath him, and then, suddenly, he woke up in the infirmary, drenched in sweat, shivering. His colleagues said they found him collapsed in the hallway, unconscious. When he asked how long he'd been out, the answer was more terrifying than any vision. Only 3 minutes. But his wristwatch showed a 47-year delay. After that night, the hospital sealed off room 223, but strangely, staff still report that the door opens by itself during stormy nights. Heart monitors in the ICU, located just 1 floor above, sometimes register unexplained activity spikes, always at Rostillas, Choaitpons, 13 a.m. And every digital device that enters room 223, watches, phones, oximeters, stops working. Some say that in that room, time shows doesn't move. Others say it waits for someone to stay forever. The telephone room at Nossa Senhora das Graças Hospital was known as the quietest spot in the administrative wing, or at least it was supposed to be. Tucked into a forgotten corner of the second basement level, the small internal call center handled communication between departments, shifts, and emergencies. 3 operators rotated through the night shift, and the space, always stuffy and filled with the soft hum of electrical buzz, felt more like an aquarium of restrained tension. Time moved slowly inside, measured only by the occasional ring and half-closed eyes staring at call logs and analog panels. It was a dull job, until extension 66 started ringing. The first time was exactly at 1:33 a.m. during the shift of Sandros Tolorowa, who had worked at the hospital for over 10 years. The ring sounded lower than usual, as if the device was vibrating on another frequency. She answered with the practiced ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. "Internal switchboard, good evening." But no one replied, just static. Then, barely audible, a sound began to emerge in the background. A heartbeat. Thump-thump, thump-thump, thump-thump. And then a whispered voice. Female, young, almost a moan. "I'm still here. They haven't forgotten me." Sandra hung up, goosebumps rising on her skin. She checked the call panel. There was no record of an incoming call on that line. She looked up the extension list. Extension 66 had been deactivated since 2009, when the obstetrics wing was moved to another hospital. It used to belong to the old room 206, where the high-risk labor and delivery room had been. Sandra remembered clearly. That was where a pregnant woman and her baby had died after suffering simultaneous cardiac arrest during a night when the defibrillator failed 3 times in a row. She tried to push the memory away, but the next night, the phone rang again. The same hour, same strange frequency, same muffled heartbeat, followed by the same voice. "I'm still here. They haven't forgotten me." This time she recorded the call. She brought the audio to the head of maintenance, who assumed it was radio interference or some leftover signal from old devices. But when they analyzed the recording more carefully, they noticed something disturbing. In the background, besides the heartbeat, there was the faint sound of crying, irregular, mixed with dripping water, and someone whispering numbers. Oh, over and over again. The numbers matched the date of death or of the woman and baby who had died in that room. The following week, 2 other operators claimed to receive the same type of call, always at the same time. One of them, Anna Paula, fainted shortly after the call. When taken to the infirmary, her heart was beating at the exact rhythm from the recording. At the administration's command, Sandra's phone was replaced. Extension 66 was removed from the system. But the next night, the call came from the supervisor's line. And this time, the voice wasn't whispering. It screamed. It repeated over and over. "The pain is still here. The blood was never cleaned. Come back, come back, come back." From then on, the operators refused to work alone. One of them quit and was found weeks later wandering along a highway with burn marks on his hands, saying, "The voices won't let me sleep anymore." The hospital decided to seal off the old room 206 with concrete. But even with the room isolated, the extension keeps ringing. Every night exactly at 1:33 a.m. Now, the security guards report hearing it too, even with the phone unplugged. A muffled tone, followed by the cry of a baby who never breathed. And no one can remove extension 66 from the panel, because it comes back. Every time it's deleted, it simply reappears, and those who answer start to forget things. First the time, then their name, then the way home. At Monte Branco General Hospital, code blues, signals of extreme medical emergencies, were triggered manually by sensors or by physical buttons installed next to each bed. Every time a code blue was activated, the system would instantly sound an alert through the corridors and simultaneously notify the ICU team, who would race to the room in an attempt to reverse the cardiac arrest or fatal event. It was a protocol taken seriously. And that's why, when the alerts started going off into Wake's empty rooms, panic first infected logic, then nerves. The first time, it was chalked up to a technical failure. It was 4:02 a.m. The emergency team was dispatched to bed 114, one of the new suites in the renovated wing. When they arrived, the room was locked. We all were with the lights off. No patient had been registered there in the past 72 hours. Yet the cardiac monitor was, it read 148 BPM. The team entered cautiously. Then they saw it. The monitor shut off by itself, and the piercing flatline tone echoed through the room like a warning. The next night, a code blue was triggered at bed 118. Once again, the room was empty. Once again, the monitor flickered to life for a few seconds. A nurse named Jorge decided to review the hallway's security footage. The video showed the monitor powering on at 3:19 a.m. But what froze his blood was the image. For 3 seconds, A dark figure stood silently in the corner of the room, perfectly still, arms by its sides, eyes white, matted as if coated in a milky film. The instant the figure moved, the camera froze. Hospital management insisted it was electrical interference, but the false codes continued. Every night, always between 3 and 4 a.m., always in different rooms, always with the monitors turning on for just a few seconds before going dark again. The IT team isolated the sensors. Still, the alerts persisted. The hospital then physically disconnected all monitors from the unoccupied rooms, and then the monitors started working without power. The technician in charge of electrical installations, a man named Ronaldo Miram, swore he had unplugged every cable. But the next night, the control room cameras captured something even more disturbing. The same man seen in room 1018 was now walking down the corridor of the wing, opening one door after another, completely unnoticed by the nurses on duty, as if he existed in a different dimension or a different layer of time. The stories began to spread. Nurses reported hearing knocking sounds on the windows that were locked shut. Reports of voices coming through the intercoms of empty rooms increased. "Please, don't let me die again," said one of them. A shaken on-call doctor swore that when he entered room 109 after an alert, he saw a patient intubated high, hooked up to equipment, breathing with difficulty. But when he blinked, the bed was empty. In a desperate move, the administration hired an independent technical consultant. The report confirmed no electrical interference, no system failure, no software glitches. The codes were being physically triggered. Someone, or something, was pressing the emergency buttons. A chilling detail emerged from old records dated 2002. During the construction of the new wing, 5 ICU patients were mistakenly left in isolation beds for over 48 hours without refrigeration after a blackout killed the systems. Their identities were lost, and the bodies were buried, nameless. Since then, the 5 rooms where the false codes go off match the numbers of those forgotten beds. Today, all monitors have been removed, the code blue buttons as well, but the alarms still go off by themselves, always between 3 bars and 4 a.m., and those who dare to enter the rooms sometimes don't come back with their eyes the same color. Some presences don't need sound or movement. It's enough that they're there, right at the edge of your vision, to make reality crack. And that was exactly the feeling many patients described in Bed 309, located in the long-term care wing of Memorial Santa Emilia Hospital. A room like any other, pale walls, windows facing the inner courtyard, a fixed monitor above the headboard, and that typical yellowish light that never turns off. But ever since the room was reopened after renovations just over 2 years ago, something in that space seemed to be waiting, like a living absence, like an echo that never ends. The first report came from an elderly woman named Donna Kalia, hospitalized after femur surgery. At exactly 3 a.m., she pressed the emergency button over and over. The staff rushed in. They found her gasping, eyes wide open, clinging to the sheets. She was screaming, "He's here, at the foot of the bed. Why did you let him in? He's not from this world." When questioned, she said she saw a very old man, dressed like a patient, skin mottled, body hunched over, and completely black eyes, standing in silence at the foot of her bed. He just stared and smiled, with endless teeth up. When the hallway light flicked on, he vanished. Management tried to downplay it, said it was a side effect of her medication, hallucinations from sleep deprivation. But other patients started reporting the same manpoik, always at the same hour, always in the same spot, at the foot of the bed, always with that fixed stare. Some screamed, others cried quietly, and some simply stopped speaking, as if something touched them from within and tore the voice away. Some didn't survive. One case in particular involved a stable patient, Jose Roberto, 52 years old, recovering from a mild stroke, who was found dead in bed 309. No cardiac arrest, no infarction, no respiratory failure. The machine showed normal activity until 3:17 a.m. Then silence. The monitor flatlined. When the team entered, he was wide-eyed, mouth open in absolute terror. A nurse said the body was still warm, but the skin looked shrunken, as if drained from the inside. The corridor camera footage revealed something even more chilling. Between 3:13 and 3:16, an elderly figure in a hospital gown with no visible face was captured, entering room 309. No one ever left. The hospital's psychologist, called to assist patients who survived these visions, began to notice a sinister pattern. All reports mentioned a phrase spoken by the old man, always the same. "I came to take what was left in me." The nursing team developed a habit of not assigning patients to the room overnight. A rotation was created so no one would be alone in there after dark. But even when the room is empty, the motion sensors keep triggering. And the heart monitor, physically unplugged, sometimes beeps with a rate of 27 BPM, a heartbeat that shouldn't belong to the living. Upon reviewing the hospital's records, it was discovered that in the 1970s, room 309 had been used for terminal patients. One of them, identified as Raimundo C., an elderly man with no family, was hospitalized there for 7 months. He died alone in silence. His body was left there for over 16 hours before being collected. And according to records from that time, the last thing he told a nurse was, "If I die forgotten, I'll come back to remind you." Since then, patients continue to die there for no medical reason. And those who survive always say the same thing. He doesn't want to kill. He just wants to be seen. And if you close your eyes in bed 309, you might feel the mattress sink, as if someone's sitting beside you, in silence, just to see if you'll remember him. Elevators are vertical tunnels of hospital routine. Step in, go up, go down, step out. Repeated automatic motions. Thoughtless. But at San Rafael Hospital, service elevator 0 radar scrubs, located in the surgical wing, started breaking that logic, because it Mazdam descended on its own hoist to a floor that, officially, no longer exists. The first incident occurred on a stormy night, while Nurse Marina was waiting on the ground floor to retrieve blood units from the supply center. When the doors opened, the digital display read, "Level 2 Huihuam." She paused. The hospital only had 2 floors above ground and a single technical basement. Level 2 had been decommissioned years ago after an explosion in an old oxygen reservoir. That subterranean wing, according to long-standing rumors, was used as an informal morgue during the last decade's pandemic, when official storage space was overwhelmed. Marina stepped inside the elevator, which held its doors open longer than usual, as if it had been waiting. Inside, the panel was off. No lights, no buttons responded. Suddenly, the door shut with a dry snap, and the elevator began descending. She screamed, pressed every button. Nothing. The movement was steady, smooth, and the sensation was of sinking, as if she were being carried not by a machine, but by something organic, alive, pulling her down, far below any known level. When the doors finally opened, Marina didn't recognize the place. The air was cold, damp, reeking of decaying flesh. The walls, supposed to be concrete, were covered in dark, root-like strands, pulsing veins that climbed toward the ceiling. The floor was wet, and the sound of our shuffling footstep echoed in the distance. Through the darkness, she saw, for just 2 seconds, a gurney being pushed by a hooded figure, whose feet never touched the floor. Before she could scream, the elevator doors shut again and returned to the ground floor. Marina stumbled out, in shock. She couldn't speak. Colleagues found her with claw marks on her arms, as if she had tried to cling to the walls to avoid being taken. Since then, similar reports have emerged. Technicians, doctors, guards, all said the elevator sometimes appeared open, even without being summoned. And when someone entered absent-mindedly, they were taken to the same level 2 Ikatas, always between 2 suns and 3:30 a.m. None stayed more than 5 minutes, and all came back different. One of them, a guard named Marilio Ham, returned mute. He's never spoken a word since. He just stands in front of the elevator every night, staring at the panel. Security footage captured something even more disturbing. One night, the elevator descended by itself, even with my power cut off. The system was down for maintenance, and yet, at 2:17 a.m., it opened its doors on the ground floor and then vanished from the system logs. For 17 minutes, when it reappeared, the internal camera showed 12 people inside. None of them matched any staff or patient records. They all faced the camera, each with the same vacant expression and eyes that were entirely black. The hospital now keeps elevator O2 locked, double padlock, alarmed. Yet still, on certain nights, the lock is found broken, and staff on the upper floors swear they hear the elevator descending endlessly. After all, maybe level 2 was never a floor, maybe it was always a destination. And for those who step in by mistake, there's no guarantee they'll return, because those who go down don't come back alone. The physical rehabilitation wing of Joomverfried University Hospital had a thermal therapy area for hydrotherapeutic baths, rarely used during the night shift. Room 14, in particular, was reserved for patients with chronic pain and severe inflammation. It housed an old jacuzzi tub, multiple shower heads, and a digital temperature control system considered outdated by current standards. But on that winter night, the system registered something no engineer was ever able to explain: sub-zero temperatures in a room with no refrigeration. It was the nursing assistant Yvonne Vinicius who discovered it. Assigned to check unused areas during his shift, he noticed that the door to room 14 was slightly ajar, even though he clearly remembered locking it just minutes earlier. As he pushed it open, a cloud of icy mist poured out from the crack. Not hot vapor, but freezing fog, as if he'd opened the door to a meat freezer. Inside, his shoes slipped. A thin layer of ice covered the floor, and the faucets were fully open, pouring water at an impossible temperature, recorded at Joomverfried. The silence in that room was absolute, except for the sound of water hitting the tiles and instantly freezing. He rushed to the control panel to shut off the hydraulic system, but the controls didn't respond. That's when he looked into the mirror at the back wall. Something was moving behind him. He spun around instinctively. Nothing. But when his eyes returned to the mirror, he saw her. A woman, completely nude, her soaked hair hanging low, her skin bluish. She stood in the darkest corner of the room. Her eyes were closed, and her feet didn't touch the floor. Her lips quivered, and a faint sound escaped. A song, a kind of chant, in a language that didn't sound human. Vinicius tried to flee, but when he turned the doorknob, it crumbled into ice, broke in his hand, and then the lights went out. In the pitch black, he heard bare feet stepping on ice, slowly approaching, and with them a whisper, almost maternal. "Do you want to sink with me?" He fainted. Hours later, he was found locked inside the room, completely soaked, in a state of severe hypothermia, even though the hospital's internal system showed normal ambient temperature. In the days that followed, room 14 was sealed off, but the mystery deepened. The janitor, while cleaning the clogged drains, found long strands of human hair, still wet, even after hours of disuse. One of the showers began spraying water by itself at exactly 3:27 a.m. every night, same time, and the thermal sensors continued to record sudden extreme drops in temperature, with no physical explanation. Old hospital records from 1984 reveal a little-known case. A psychiatric patient named Clarice M. Kikwa, who suffered from self-harming episodes, drowned in the bathtub in room 14 after being left alone due to a staff error. She had locked herself in and opened all the taps until the room flooded. When found, she was submerged, her face serene, and with an open smile. Since then, staff claim that when someone enters room 14 alone, the mirror reflects something else, someone standing behind them, or inside the tub, and recovering patients report sudden chills, along with visions of a woman singing from behind the curtain, always wet, always cold, always waiting. And every single night, motion sensors record activity in room 14, even when it's empty. In the age of digital hospital systems, every patient has their full medical history recorded in detail. Tests, prescriptions, symptoms, medication times, all stored in real time and accessible via secure login. That's why when the electronic chart of patient Leandro F. Ilan, who had died at 15 a.m. on a Wednesday, began receiving automated updates at 3:47 a.m., the IT department at Santa Candida Regional Hospital went into high alert. After all, no one had accessed the system. Wait. The computer was turned off and the patient's chart was supposed to be closed. The notification appeared quietly on the main system like a routine status update. Patient returned at 03:47, condition unstable. Nurse Dicori Guillermism, on duty that night, assumed it was a glitch, but when he opened the chart, something froze him in place. The interface, normally clean and minimal, was glitching. The screen flickered. Fields duplicated by themselves, and in the bottom right corner, a strange red icon blinked, an inverted cross. When he tried to edit or correct the entry, the system locked. Then a new phrase appeared, typed automatically in lowercase. He didn't like being buried alone. Guillerme called ET. The technicians accessed the server, and things escalated. The patient's chart kept updating, even when the database was disconnected from the network. Apparently, the system was receiving sensor data, heartbeat, blood pressure, body temperature, as if the patient were still admitted. And worse, the signal's origin was tracked to room 07 in the emergency wing, on where Leandro had died just hours earlier. But the room had been locked since the time of death, and the body had already been removed. Security camera footage revealed the most disturbing moment. At exactly 3:47 a.m., the bed in room 7 slowly sank, as if someone had laid down. One of the heart monitors, disconnected from the network, powered on by itself. The cardiac line wavered, slowly, gently. Then the screen displayed. Patient connected. Attempts to reboot the system failed. The next day, all patient records associated with room 07 began receiving automatic annotations, written in the first person. Messages like, "It's dark in here. Why did they delete my name from the system? If they forget me, others will come." The medical staff, still skeptical, decided to wipe the server. Backups were erased. All of Leandro's data was deleted. But the following week, during the night shift, his name reappeared on the list of active patients. On the hospital entrance screen, his name blinked, as if he were waiting to be seen. That's when a staff member, Tech Chair Rodrigo Ruben, remembered something long buried. Leandro had been admitted 2 years prior in another ER after an overdose, but due to an administrative error, he was never entered into the central system. He had lived 4 days in critical condition, without a chart, without a bed number, without identity, invisible. When he died, there was no formal record. He was buried as an unidentified person. The current electronic chart, the one now acting on its own, was the first time his name had ever been typed, and since then he has been responding. Staff now report that whenever they type into room 07 system, the text is automatically overwritten with phrases, "They didn't write." A doctor typed analgesic prescription, and the system changed it to "Pain is necessary." A nurse tried to update the discharge field, and it was replaced with "There is no exit for the forgotten." It tried to disconnect the room from the network, but every night at exactly 3:47 a.m., a new entry appears. Patient, Leandro F. Status, awaiting visit. And what terrifies the team most now is that he's started writing in other patients' charts. Operating Room 2 Wairos at Santa Clara Hospital had long been known among staff as the room of the error with no culprit. Years ago, during a chaotic night shift, a young patient died from sudden asphyxiation while awaiting intubation. The cause was never clarified. The endotracheal tube vanished mysteriously between the ICU and the surgical center. A nurse was fired. Another suffered a nervous breakdown. Since then, the room had been avoided by most, used only during times of critical overflow. That rainy night, the hospital was exactly that, overwhelmed. The ER was packed, patients lined the hallways, and Dr. R. Lucas, a newly arrived intensivist, was assigned to perform an emergency intubation on a patient in acute respiratory failure. When he arrived at WIC Operating Room 2-6, the team was already in position, or at least appeared to be. The gurney was set, the patient sedated, the monitor humming. But something felt off. The silence was different, heavy, suffocating. Lucas gloved up, grabbed the equipment, and approached the head of the bed. As he prepared to begin the procedure, he noticed something strange. The tube was already inserted, properly fixed, balloon inflated, connected to the ventilator. Perplexed, no one claimed to have done it. Thinking perhaps another doctor had performed the procedure earlier, Lucas checked the patient's chart. Nothing. No note, no signature, no timestamp. When he asked the nursing technician, she replied with a trembling voice, "Doctor, I just brought the tube. No one's been in here yet." Before he could respond, the lights flickered. The cardiac monitor froze for 2 seconds. When it came back, the vitals were altered. Irregular heart rate, dropping oxygen saturation, and, most terrifying of all, 2 overlapping heartbeats. As if 2 bodies were connected to the same monitor. He asked. The anesthesiologist in the room, an older man named Dr. Antunes Dion, turned pale. His voice cracked as he murmured, "It was the same, exactly the same, last time." Lucas moved to recheck the intubation, but when he illuminated the tube with his laryngoscope, what he saw wasn't the patient's trachea. It was something dark, pulsing, with eyelid-like folds blinking slowly inside. He recoiled instinctively, nearly falling backward. When he looked again, everything appeared normal. He wanted to abort the procedure, but the patient, supposedly sedated, opened his eyes. They were completely white. And then he whispered, strained. He intubated me too. Panic broke out in the room. The surgery was canceled, and the patient was transferred to another OR. The digital chart was left open on the terminal for a few minutes. When a nurse returned to it, a new note had been entered, one no one had typed. Intubated at OR-213 by Dr. Eduardo B. But Dr. Eduardo had been the attending physician during the unexplained death years ago, the one who died in that very room. OR-213 abag, Moy, trying to intubate a patient who never responded to treatment. Footage from the OR's security camera revealed one more anomaly. At the exact moment the tube was found already in place, a tall shadow appeared standing directly behind Dr. Lucas, but there was no one there. And the shadow moved its arms with his as if they were fused, as if another presence was guiding his hands. Today, Operating Room 2 is once again avoided, but when it is used, the reports persist. Surgical gloves disappear. The endotracheal tube is sometimes already in place. Before the procedure begins, the monitors pick up strange sounds, not alarms, but whispers in a doctor's voice. Breathe, that's it. Breathe. Now close your eyes, you won't wake up. In the long, cold corridors of the ICU at Saint-Damien Hospital, the nights aren't just silent, they're empty of meaning. Every step echoes like a call backward. Every heartbeat from a patient seems to stretch beyond time itself. And it was there, in that place where lives hang suspended between machines and morphine, that the reports began. About a figure in white, always at a distance, walking like a nurse, but with no face. The first to notice were the patients. One of them, Mr. Milton, an elderly man with a severe pneumonia but fully lucid, would call for the lady in white every night. He said she came to see if he was still breathing. When asked to describe her, he replied, "It's like she's wearing a veil. But it's not a veil. It's like God forgot to finish her face." At first, the medical team dismissed it, delirium, sleep confusion. But then other patients of different ages, conditions, and mental states began reporting the same thing. A thin woman in white with her hair tied in a bun, walking slowly between the beds. She doesn't speak, she just watches, and when she gets too close, she vanishes. Caio, a night nurse, saw her during a routine check. He noticed a white figure at the end of the hallway. Thinking it was a colleague, he called out, "Diana, that you?" The woman slowly turned, but said nothing. As Caio walked toward her, he realized the figure was floating slightly. Her feet barely touched the ground, and then he saw it. Where her face should have been was a smooth, pale surface, with no eyes, no mouth, no nose, like a mask of flesh. Caio screamed. She disintegrated like dust in wind. Security cameras caught strange movements during the night, shadows passing through the hallway between 3 and 3:15 a.m., always during that window. One recording showed what appeared to be a woman in white, her head slightly tilted, walking slowly from room to room. In one clip where the lighting was clearer, something horrifying was visible. The figure appeared at multiple doors simultaneously, as if she was split, as if she was part of the ICU itself. A resident doctor, Dr. Paula Main, reported that while administering medication to a patient in a coma, she felt a hand touch her shoulder. It was cold, without temperature. When she turned, no one was there, but the patient's monitor showed a sudden spike in heart activity. The comatose man whispered a single sentence. She said, "My time was up." Internal investigations followed. Records showed that years ago, a nurse named Leila Andrade had worked in that same unit. During a solitary night shift, she suffered a fatal aneurysm between the beds. She was found collapsed on the floor, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, her badge still pinned to her chest. She had died before anyone noticed. Her body was only discovered after a patient complained. "There's someone standing, staring at me all night." Leila was buried with honors, but some say part of her remained. Not her body, but her function, her motion, her instinct, the need to care, even after death. Since then, staff avoid looking straight toward the end of the ICU corridor during the night. They say that if you see the faceless nurse from the front, she takes your identity, and in the following days, you begin to forget your name, your job, even your own reflection in the mirror. And the most disturbing part, every time someone dies on the night shift, the system prints a supplemental death report. The final field reads, "Final attendant," always auto-filled. And the signature, always illegible, carries the initials, L.A. On the 4th floor of Nossa Senhora dos Remedios Hospital, there was a room no one wanted to occupy. Patients said it was too cold. Nurses avoided entering alone, and doctors simply pretended it didn't exist. Room 412, a seemingly ordinary room, hospital bed, heart monitor, bathroom, cabinet, a chair for companions, and a large window overlooking the hospital's inner courtyard. But what happened with that window? Wasn't ordinary. Every night, precisely at mortuary 3 Morham, boom, it would open, always by itself, even when locked, even when sealed shut from the inside, even taped down. A freezing wind would rush into the room like a cold whisper, and anyone present at that hour, patient or staff, would witness something in the glass. Not a reflection, not a shadow, but a face. And the most terrifying part, it was always their own face, but twisted, inhuman, wearing a warped smile with unnaturally deep eyes. Like the version in the glass wasn't really them. Yasmin Juruita, a young nurse recently hired, was covering an extra shift. When she entered room 412 to administer medication, she saw the window open by itself right in front of her. There was no wind, no reason, just the latch turning slowly, as if moved by invisible hands. As she approached to close it, she saw something that froze her blood. Her own reflection was staring back with her head slightly tilted, like a curious animal. And then it blinked, but she hadn't blinked. Yasmin fell backward and screamed for help. When the team arrived, the window was locked. No one saw anything, but she refused to ever enter that room again. She began showing strange symptoms: memory loss, blackouts, and identity confusion. Days later, she was found trying to climb through the window of the infirmary, saying she needed to get back to the right side of the glass. The chart for the patient who had been in 412 that night, a man named Horadamar, recorded a disturbing note made before his death. The version of me in the glass feels more alive than I do. When digging through old records, it was discovered that room 412 had been the site of 3 suicides by defenestration in a single month back in 1998. All patients jumped from the window, leaving no notes. Each had said days before that someone outside was calling, that they were seeing things, talking to the reflection. All of them died at exactly 4:30 a.m. The administration tried sealing the window. They installed locks, alarms, motion sensors. Nothing worked. Every night, precisely at 3 a.m., the latch tripped. The window opened. The alarm failed. And for a few seconds, the glass became a mighty black mirror, reflecting things that weren't in the room. A skeptical forensic doctor decided to spend the night there with an infrared camera. At 2:59 a.m., everything was normal. At 3 a.m., the camera shut off. When it turned back on, 12 minutes of footage had been corrupted. When they analyzed the remaining audio, they heard her own voice, faint and distant. "Now I'm where I belong," the reflection stayed behind. She was found in the corner of the room, sitting, staring at the closed window, her eyes wide open, unblinking, and since then, she has never spoken another word. Her tests are normal, but she compulsively writes the same sentence on every surface. The one in the glass doesn't want to leave. It wants to switch. Today, room 412 is officially under maintenance, but every night the light turns on by itself, and the window still opens, always at 3 or convention am. There are places in hospitals that don't appear on maps, small storage rooms, utility closets, forgotten corners left behind in renovations, and administrative shifts. At the Municipal Hospital of Pilar, storage room 3BE Alvalle, located at the far end of a corridor used exclusively by the night pharmacy, was one of those places. A narrow windowless room with flickering fluorescent lighting and peeling walls, where the syringe cabinet was kept. An old iron piece with 2 rusty doors and a double lock. During the day, it was restocked, normally, but at night, no one wanted to be responsible for refilling it. Roberto Sixma, a nursing technician with just 3 weeks on the job, was assigned to retrieve a new kit of sterile syringes and needles for the infusion ward. Time of request, 2:12 a.m. As he turned into the hallway that led to storage 3B, he noticed an irregular noise, like something repeatedly thudding against the wall behind the cabinet. Dry, rhythmic knocks. He forced the key into the lock, which turned with resistance. But before he could open the door, the sound stopped. Total silence. As if whatever was inside knew he had arrived. When he opened the door, the smell hit him. Not just mold, it was dried blood. The cabinet was filthy despite having been cleaned that afternoon. On the floor, a dark puddle had started to form. But the most disturbing part was the inside of the cabinet. Dozens of broken bent syringes and others already used, filled with red liquid, as if someone had reused them. Yet there were no records of any nighttime access. As he reached out for one of the trays, Roberto heard, loud, clear, 8 inches from his ear, the sound of a child crying, a weak, muffled sob, like someone trapped behind the wall. He stepped back, slammed the door shut, and ran down the hall. In the following nights, other staff began to report similar events. Syringes would disappear from trays before being used. Sealed equipment appeared, opened, tampered with, and filled with dark residue. One nurse, while collecting a batch from the cabinet, found inside it an old rag doll with button eyes and stitching across its chest, and a syringe stabbed into its fabric heart. When she showed it to her colleagues, the doll had vanished. Security was called. A surveillance camera was installed inside the storage room. The first night of recording was normal, until 3:11 a.m. In the footage, the cabinet is seen opening on its own, slowly. No one comes out. But the syringes begin to fall one by one, as if pushed by invisible hands. Then a dark shadow takes shape in the corner of the wall. It's small, crouched, and gently rocks back and forth, crying. An internal investigation revealed something few knew. In the 1980s, Storage Room 3B was once a pediatric injection room. Children were treated there for vaccines, medications, and clinical trials, many of them experimental. One child, Isadora, 9 years old, reportedly died after an accidental overdose, when a technician administered 3 consecutive doses of a sedative still in testing. The case was buried. But in the oldest records, the syringe cabinet was already there. And the last thing written in the occurrence book at the time was, "The cabinet knocks," and she's still in there. Today, staff swear they still hear knocking sounds coming from the storage room, always at 3:11 a.m. Too short. 3 long, too short. As if it were Wi-Fi code. Too beyond. And those who hear it begin to lose their sense of time. They start forgetting where medications were stored, administer incorrect doses, write words they don't remember typing like hurts, stop, one more, mom, and the next day, that same doll reappears. Not all horrors in hospitals scream, some whisper. They slip in slowly through window cracks, hide in the folds of curtains, and only reveal themselves when it's already too late. In the terminal patient wing of Santo Angelo Hospital, this was an unspoken truth. There, grief was routine, and death, an old acquaintance. But sometimes, death arrived earlier than expected and asked for permission to enter. The most well-known case, though never officially recorded, involved the patient Helena M. Horn, 68 years old, diagnosed with advanced stage cancer. Despite the grim prognosis, she remained lucid, strong, and, above all, determined to fight until the end. On a July night with silent corridors and stable monitors, Nurse Tatiana entered the room to administer a mild dose of morphine. She found Helena smiling at the ceiling, eyes filled with tears, whispering as if speaking to someone invisible. Tatiana approached, concerned, but Helena only murmured, "Thank you, doctor. It was kind of you to help me cross." Tatiana was startled. There was no doctor in the room, and no one by that name on duty. When she checked the monitor, all vital signs were stable, until the heart rate began to drop gently, as if someone were turning Helena off from the inside. No jolts, no sudden stops, just a slow, elegant, serene decline, and then flatline. The team rushed in, but Helena was already gone. Yet something was wrong. Her body remained warm for more than 8 hours. Far too long. Clinically impossible. No rigor mortis, no cooling. As if the body hadn't yet been released by the spirit. In the following days, fragmented reports began to surface. An attendant of another patient claimed to have seen a man in a white coat leaving Helena's room around 3:00 a.m., holding a clipboard and with no visible face. The elevator was triggered at the exact second of death by itself. The sensor on the terminal wing's door registered an entry with no physical presence. And most disturbing of all, Helena's heart monitor kept working, even after being unplugged. For 3 more nights, hospital staff began calling the phenomenon the polite farewell, a presence that doesn't force, that doesn't invade, but talks to the dying. That invites them to accept, to cross over, as if death itself, in some cases, took the form of a doctor, perhaps the last one the person trusted in life, to offer the passage in a human way. In other cases, patients in deep coma muttered strange phrases at the moment of death. "Be right back, just going to see the doctor. He promised it wouldn't hurt. I'm only taking what's mine." And then they died, with the same pattern. No convulsion, no agony, no struggle, as if someone had held their hand until the end. But not all returned in peace. One nurse reported that upon entering the room of a recently deceased patient, she found a second gurney pushed against the wall, with the impression of weight on the mattress, as if someone invisible was still sitting there, and on the floor beside the bed a wet footprint of a dress shoe. These events were never mentioned in official records, but in the nights following Helena's death, a disturbing detail began to occur. Every door in the terminal wing opened on its own at exactly 3:03 a.m., simultaneously, as if someone were passing, room by room, leaving the same message for each one. It's time. And they say that if you're on shift alone in that wing between 3:00 and 3:05 a.m. and feel someone gently touch your shoulder, don't look back. Every hospital institution has its myths. Figures seen at the end of a shift, whispers heard when you're alone in the break room, lights that flicker at the same time every night. But at São Geronimo Hospital, there's an unwritten rule passed quietly among the oldest staff. Never look down the hallway if you're leaving early. Because they say that's where she appears, the nurse who comes to collect on broken promises. The story begins with Luciana, a nursing technician who decided to leave her shift before it ended. She claimed fatigue, anxiety, and a sudden wave of nausea. It was 2:45 a.m. As she crossed the side hallway of the neonatal ward, she heard something behind her. Footsteps, rhythmic, light, dragging. But when she turned around, there was no one there. She kept walking. The steps continued, now with a faint metallic scraping, as if something was scratching the floor. She stopped again. Silence. Until, in the reflection of a side window, she saw someone at the end of the hallway. A feminine figure, thin, dressed in white, hair tied up, body still, head tilted. She stood directly in the center of the hallway, staring at Luciana. Luciana blinked. The figure was still there. But Tom? Closer now. As if it had moved 3 meters forward without taking a single step. Luciana ran. She slammed her badge against the time clock so hard the plastic cracked. She went home in a state of panic. And that same night, she began to dream. All was the same. The empty hallway, the sound of footsteps behind her, and a voice that said, "You promised to care until the end." Other accounts began to surface, always from staff who had left their shifts early. One of them, Quasisant. Marcelo, a night shift assistant, claimed to have seen a woman at the end of the orthopedic wing's hallway. He tried to wave, but she did not blink, did not breathe. She just stared at him. He said her eyes looked like pits. No light, no color, no soul. When he turned to run, he felt something cold touch the back of his neck. Since then, Marcelo has partially lost his peripheral vision. He says he sees shadows moving at the edge of his field of view every day. What scares the staff most, however, is the pattern. Everyone who claims to have seen the nurse begins to show progressive symptoms of memory loss. Names, schedules, responsibilities. Some can no longer find their way home. A physical therapist named Erica was found crying in the supply room saying, "I know what I'm supposed to do, but I don't remember who I am." The security cameras captured the figure only once, at 2:58 a.m., hallway C, a woman in white standing still, her face blurred. The recording was lost after a sudden power surge, but the system log shows that someone clocked in at 3:03 using the badge of a nurse who died in 2007. The same nurse who, according to rumors, died of exhaustion after working 40 straight hours without leaving the hospital. Her name, Isabel R. Brast, head nurse, committed, never left a patient behind. And it was her who, according to old documents, wrote a letter before her death containing a single sentence: "If someone leaves before their time, I'll stay in their place." Today, anyone thinking of leaving their shift early thinks twice and never, ever looks down the hallway. Because if you do, she might see you too. And if she sees you, she'll want to know why you left. And she hates broken promises.